If anyone thought Kalin was just another useless servant boy, they had not seen the monster waiting in the dark. He woke up after a donkey kicked his head, but the real shock was the system panel before his eyes. By the end of this rise, the boy mocked as weak would face horrors that even trained men feared. It was harvest month when Rain woke up with a massive bump on his head in the outer courtyard of Habsburg Manor in shining Goldtown, Meister County. That is when a flood of memories hit him. Rain was a scrawny, black-haired kid who just joined that manor servant training program 2 days ago. His family scraped together most of their savings and pulled some strings with the head servant just to get him a spot. They put children through training and tests, then selected a few to become official household staff. Stable hands guards, cooks, blacksmiths, dog trainers, and so on. So basically, Rain transmigrated into another world. The blacksmith bellowed at 2 boys struggling to pin the donkey's leg. Meanwhile, a group of bigger, better-dressed boys nearby were pointing at him and laughing. Those were the rich kids' sons of the town's tavern innkeeper and tanner. Rain kept his head down and pretended not to care about their mockery, but he was actually listening closely to their chatter. Albro Town, not far from here, got attacked by a wandering ogre last night. Killed a bunch of people, Freckles whispered. Thickbrows added, looking scared. Before, the original owner of his body had never left this small town. So he had only heard travelers' tales about monsters in the dark sea, creatures, haunted houses, and deadly plagues. Bar called Rain and George for the next group. Rain jumped up and went to work with a blonde boy named George. A bit of pus oozed out during trimming and the donkey thrashed hard. In under 2 minutes, Rain was drenched in sweat. George turned red with embarrassment, but Rain barely noticed because something strange had appeared on his vision. You assisted in hoof trimming. His hoof trimming skill gained experience. The system said Rain unlocked a profession panel. Whatever that world had in store for him, things just got a lot more interesting. Below it was a grid of icons, all dark and blurry except one at the bottom. Why did trimming a donkey's hoof trigger a blacksmith apprentice panel instead of, say, a veterinarian panel? Or maybe in that world, hoof work is just a blacksmith job. In a medieval world, a blacksmith is a big deal. Master Bar Rain wanted to go again, Rain called out. George was pulling at his ragged clothes, whispering. Rain worked the entire morning until his arms were shaking and he physically could not continue. The key discovery skill experience and profession experience were different things, probably because hoof trimming has low relevance to actual blacksmithing. Another day and they had all be done. Rain checked his attributes and saw the truth clearly. His strength was below average, but his spirit was unusually high, probably because 2 souls had merged inside one body. At the dining area, they got a block of black bread, half a smoked fish, and a big bowl of watery vegetable soup. Rain picked up the bread. Rain nearly spat it out. Here, Rain could not even get meat at all. Half the boys in the room were sneaking glances at her. Spend that energy figuring out how to pass the exam. Funny, Rain could see the gears turning in his head. My body ached everywhere, but watching those 1 notifications kept him going. About 20 young men and women showed up in the outer courtyard. Children of low-ranking nobles and wealthy merchants under Count Habsburg. Stop drooling, brats, Bar said bluntly. Learning a craft was the best a servant kid could hope for. Then Rain saw something that changed everything. The top half of the stone slid off at an angle and crashed to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. So that was what a real knight can do. That is not something a normal human can do. Suddenly becoming a blacksmith did not feel so exciting anymore. Then things got even more interesting. Rain could only see her from the side, but even from that angle he could tell she was beautiful, lean and coiled like a leopard ready to pounce. They clashed. A teenage girl generating that kind of force. She darted around him, attacking from tricky angles. Perez stood like a rock in the ocean, blocking every strike without counterattacking. Her body drew taut like a fully stretched bow. The collision was deafening. Only 4 or 5 could watch without flinching. Both Perez and the girl glanced his way instantly. They turned away. She had an oval face, slightly thick eyebrows that gave her a bold look, and striking brown-gray eyes that seemed to glow. After they finished, the squires began learning some advanced sword technique under Perez's guidance. It was heavy, surprisingly so for its size. From the weight of that 1 chip, Rain could estimate the full sword must weigh around 70 or 80 pounds. But that slender girl swinging it just as easily. Or was it inherited through bloodlines? And maybe Rain was too old to start the path to becoming extraordinary. But Rain was not like them. If it could trigger a blacksmith apprentice panel from trimming hooves, then surely it could trigger a combat profession panel too. My eyes slowly lit up with excitement. The edge had fish-scale hammering marks, layer upon layer of careful forging. Rain wrapped the fragment in a scrap of cloth, tucked it into his pocket, and got back to pressing down donkey hooves. The best spots in the middle were taken by the fake rich kids, and Rain slept on the edge. Thick Brows barked at him. Rain wanted to fight him. Rain spent over an hour cleaning the whole room, sweeping, mopping, wiping every bed. No new profession panel triggered. Maybe that profession did not exist. Rain was thinking about how to change his situation fast. But no, a servant boy like him could not even get near the count. In a supernatural world, power was what mattered. Next morning, they were back to hoof trimming. My hoof trimming skill sat at 32 out of 100. His one source of experience was about to dry up. Rain flipped to his skill panel. Donkeys and horses are the same family after all, but Rain needed to test it to be sure. The other boys groaned when they saw the tall horses. But Rain was thrilled. Bar brought out a draft horse, smaller than the rest, but still bigger than the biggest donkey. Bar called Rain and George to handle the first horse. Bar took a pre-made U-shaped horseshoe, measured it against the hoof, trimmed the excess, then started nailing it on. After all 4 hooves were done, Rain was drenched in sweat. You focused on learning horseshoeing for 15 minutes. It worked, and even better than Rain expected. Blacksmith Apprentice was now at 8 out of 100. That was the trick to leveling up faster. Rain felt like a door had just swung open in front of him. A second icon had lit up next to hoof trimming. Everything else on the grid was still dark. Then Rain can level it up through practice. Rain was so focused that when the noble girl Krya appeared again at the training field, he barely glanced up. Rain, you have changed. Guess Rain just realized how important it is to learn a trade. George accepted his answer. His mother had no steady income, and Rain had a little sister to worry about. While they worked, Rain kept his ears open. Thick Brows said they are raiding small towns near the coast. The sheriff, a new sheriff named Hamilton, is coming here from the county capital. That world was not peaceful at all. Bar noticed him struggling and kindly offered him a rest. Every chance to gain experience mattered too much to waste. Rain was 1 point away from leveling up. Congratulations! Fragmented memories flooded in like Rain had been trimming hooves for months. Why he flicked his wrist at the sharpest curve of the hoof? Rain knew he could do it himself. Asking to try would make him stand out, and standing out could be dangerous. Rain checked his blacksmith apprentice level. Master Bar, could Rain try trimming a hoof himself? Bar studied his face carefully, remembered how hard Rain had been working, and nodded. Every trainee stared at him in disbelief, trying to look good in front of Bar. Freckles agreed. He did not think his skinny body could handle this. The fake rich kids went quiet. You learned this in just a few days. Rain was watching his notifications. Blacksmith apprentice profession experience too. Bar confirmed Rain could trim hooves independently now. He was clearly pleased. Whether it was jealousy or the fake rich kids pressuring them, Rain did not know, and he did not care. Congratulations. Remaining skill points. Skill points. His strength was 4, the lowest stat, and the reason Rain had been helpless against the bullies. Warmth surged from his heart and spread through his entire body. Rain felt like he could trim another 100 hooves without stopping. The next profession level needed 300 experience instead of 100. Better to save it for something more difficult to learn later, like weapon forging. His trimming was smoother, faster, at least 20% better than before. At dinner, Rain devoured 3.5 blocks of black bread and refilled his vegetable soup 3 times, licking the bowl clean. After dinner, Rain walked back to the dormitory. Thick Brows stepped forward and slapped his face lightly, taunting him. Rain swung with everything he had and slapped him across the face so hard his head rang like a bell. He doubled over and vomited his entire dinner onto the floor. Get him! Fist after fist, Rain hit him without stopping. Rain just needed to make sure Thick Brows remembered this beating for a very long time. The fight did not last long. By luck, it was the same steward his family had bribed to get him into the program, but it was not over. His eyes were bloodshot the next day, glaring at him the whole time. Sword training starts next week, Thick Brows said through gritted teeth. When they spar, Rain was going to beat him until his own mother would not recognize him. Rain spent the day trimming hooves and teaching other trainees the technique, how to use the scraper's weight, how to follow the hoof's curve. And just like that, Rain broke the fake rich kid's hold on the group. Was Rain worried the others would surpass him with his system? Not a chance. Horseshoeing level 156 out of 100 with remaining attribute points. Then a steward in a neat gray robe came to make an announcement. They could go home, and starting the day after they had begun basic sword training under a manor guard named Jabert. Would it trigger a new profession panel? But first, Rain had to go home and meet the original Rain's family, his parents, his 7-year-old sister. Rain did not know how they were doing. Want to go pick nuts in the forest tomorrow? His uncle was the ranger for Habsburg Manor's private forest. Deal, Rain said. That evening, Rain walked home alone through town. My family lived on the south side, which meant Rain had to cross the whole town along the main street. When Rain reached the town square, a crowd had gathered around the notice board. Shoulder-length blonde hair, long face, a scar running diagonally from his forehead across his nose to his right cheek. Assault on 3 women in Petertown. 5 gold coins. With that kind of money, Rain could. Then Rain shook his head. I could work there and earn profession experience at the same time. He charged 5 or 10 silver coins for an apprenticeship. Rain would need another plan. She looked stronger after just 1 week. Before the attribute point the body had nothing, a woman was working in the small vegetable garden out front. The moment Rain saw her kind face, memories came flooding in. Mother, it is him. She was his mother now. This was Mint, his 7-year-old sister. A sturdy man with a square jaw and too many worry lines on his forehead. You've gotten stronger, Rain. He seemed surprised by how emotional Rain was, but he hugged him back with a smile. Salted pork? A big plate of mashed potatoes, some rye bread, and a bottle of milk. Rain wolfed down his portion and was only half full. All Rain could think about was meat. Rain, you are still hungry. Brother Rain was small. Father started to offer his bread too. These people loved him. Rain took Mother's pork and minced potatoes but refused Father's bread. That night Rain slept deeply. Mother pushed her salted pork toward Rain without hesitation. Mint said she was small and did not need much. Anna, his neighbor, a quiet girl who had moved here with her mother about a year ago only for her mother to mysteriously disappear. She turned to face him. Hello, Rain, she said shyly, looking down. George appeared at the gate. Anna's eyes showed the same longing, though she did not say anything. Bringing extra people would be wrong. Such a well-behaved kid for her age. Bad luck. Anna's mother did not just disappear. Also, George added 2 children from families on the north side of town went missing recently. The disappearances that were happening in other towns. A mother taken away. George and Rain came back from the manor's private forest with a full basket of wild blueberries, hazelnuts, and chestnuts. 70% of the forest around town belonged to Habsburg Manor. But then Rain noticed something that stopped him cold. Nothing wasted. What kind of life makes someone find happiness in a bran cake? So Rain came up with a better idea. Mint nodded seriously. She took them. After lunch, Rain headed to the blacksmith shop on the main road. Boris Patton was forging an iron pod while several apprentices worked around him. Rain would work for free. Bellows' work required no real skill, just effort. If trimming donkey hooves gave blacksmith apprentice experience, a bellows certainly would. The system said Rain learned a new skill, bellows operation. Profession experience started ticking up too. They could not understand why anyone would work this hard at the most boring job in the shop for free. He was quite pleased with the unexpected side effect. And then the notification Rain had been hoping for appeared. Bellows operation level 2. 245 out of 300. Remaining skill points. The next level needed 500 experience. The system announced that Rain had learned a new skill, points that would make him stronger. That evening, Rain dragged himself back to the manor, barely ate, and collapsed into sleep. He had a hand-and-a-half sword on his hip and moved with a steady, grounded confidence. Thick Brows raised his hand eagerly. He looked pretty good. Still, Rain had to admit Thick Brows was ahead of him in both strength and technique. Under a rain shelter, Rain saw real weapons, unsharpened, great swords, single-handed swords, shields, lances, and various types of armor. Bert pointed them to a rack of wooden short swords. His 5-year-old brother plays with these. Hoof-trimming genius would not get far with swords. The practice sword surprised him, though. Bert demonstrated the 3 basic forms. Sharp, sachitai. Powerful, precise. It looked simple watching Bert, but doing it was another matter entirely. My body had zero muscle memory for any of that. Bert walked between them, correcting form and bellowing encouragement. They all roared back. You performed basic swordsmanship training. Congratulations. My heart sank a little. But after a moment, Rain thought it through. The system gave him what matched his actual level. For someone starting from nothing, an easy-to-climb ladder was exactly what Rain needed. That was his first combat profession, his first real step on the path to power. Like the blacksmith panel, it was filled with dark icons. Basic swordsmanship, level 1-2 out of 100. Next week was dog trainer training, then archery the week after. That was not good enough. The new combat panel was only militia, not swordsman or warrior. The skill jumped from level 1 straight to level 2. Scattered fragments of drills that embedded themselves into his muscle memory. Even better, the militia profession experience started climbing faster with a level 2 skill driving it. Where would Rain get the money for that? Wait, does that make you a sword genius? George went back to his own clumsy practice while Rain kept grinding. He is almost at his level. And look at George. They could not accept it. Instructor H-Bert was watching him carefully as well. He was waiting to see if his progress would continue or plateau. Rain deliberately slowed his swings and reduced his accuracy. Leading them was Krya, the chestnut-haired girl with the great sword. She seemed to notice 3 of them. She probably guessed he had trained beforehand. Rain knew his form was not perfect, but apparently what caught her attention was how visibly he improved with each repetition. "That is Rain, a tenant farmer's son," the attendant replied. Dennis spoke up beside her. Krya's expression turned cold. And yet here nobles still think their blood makes them superior. Behind him, another boy in silk clothes glanced between Krya and Dennis with an amused smirk, as if he found the whole scene entertaining. H-Bert became convinced Rain had real talent. Today they start sparring. We faced each other. Then watching him shine at hoof trimming, he could tolerate that. We both thrust at the same time, but his reach was longer. He was clearly stronger. Richard was right for now. My level 2 was not enough. This was not sparring. That crossed the line. Training memories flooded his mind. If that connected, Rain would be out for weeks minimum. The sword in his hand felt like an extension of his arm. Richard smirked, believing 2 years of training would crush Rain. My eyes. Rain leaned back sharply, caught his blade on his, then snapped upright, using his core and counterattacked in one fluid motion. Dead silence. The reversal had happened so fast nobody could process it. Rain imagined him thinking. Krya watched from horseback, her sharp eyes glittering. "Rain, tenant farmer's son?" "Rain wins," H-Bert declared. Basic swordsmanship experience 17. 9 profession points from one short sparring match. Fighting an opponent near his level was the fastest way to improve. He knew he would not let that go. Rain had a feeling he was already planning something that went beyond sparring. Maybe having a rival like him was not so bad after all. He had never agreed to spar with him again. Hard had them pair up for practice. The experience gained was barely anything. "Rain, come here." Every trainee went silent. Thick brows looked like his head might explode. Rain bowed slightly, took his stance, and launched a full-power stepping thrust straight at him. He was controlling his strength to match his absolute limit. They traded over a dozen blows in about 10 seconds. But the notifications were incredible. 30 seconds of sparring with H-Bert equaled 3 days of solo training. Your basic swordsmanship is already comparable to an ordinary militia. He announced the end of practice. But Rain was not done. H-Bert was about to leave when he caught him staring at him with burning eyes. He chuckled, probably thinking Rain was just a competitive kid who did not want to quit. My body was actually near collapse, but Rain could not waste that opportunity. So Rain spent his saved attribute point on strength, bringing it to 6, equal to an average adult man. Strength 6. Agility 6. Spirit 8, Constitution 5. They sparred again and again and again. My militia was at 99 out of 100. Rain watched his retreating figure practically flee the training grounds, and he felt genuinely heartbroken. Just as Rain was agonizing over that one missing experience point, a pretty maid approached him. Rain told George to go ahead and let his parents know he had be late for dinner. But she was not the main attraction. The Count's youngest daughter had summoned him personally. Maybe the night stewards notice if Rain was lucky, but the Count's own daughter. The rack held real steel weapons, all sharpened. Krya switched to a hand-and-a-half sword to match him. Rain blocked instinctively. 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds gave him exactly what Rain needed, she said, looking him over. "The chances of you becoming a proper knight are slim." Rain saw it in her eyes. She raised an eyebrow. Rain immediately put his new attribute point into agility, raising it from 6 to 7. Speed. Every point of agility would help. Rain lunged. He was fighting at a completely different level than 30 seconds ago. Even Shadia's expression shifted from calm to surprised. "Very good, Rain." Rain could not tell if she was satisfied or not. "Goodbye, Miss Krya," Rain said with a bow and left. Shadia asked why Krya was interested in him when other noble youths like Dennis and Marcus were already level 3 squires. They're fundamentally different from Rain. His progress looks fast, but his potential is burned out. Krya did not answer directly, but she watched his retreating figure with thoughtful eyes. She wanted to see more. She said that becoming extraordinary required 4 things: determination, talent, perseverance, and opportunity. But while a Count's daughter was considering his future, someone else was planning to end it. "Here are 10 silver coins," Richard said. "Fine. He is heading home tonight and going back to the manor tomorrow evening. He's just a kid." Rain was heading home in the fading light, thinking about what Krya might do next when he heard footsteps behind him. My agility of 7 saved him. The attacker froze for a split second, shocked that Rain dodged. Rain spun around, grabbed his club, and yanked. Rain could feel him relax, thinking that scrawny kid was no threat. He dropped the club, clutched himself, and crumpled. The whole fight lasted less than 10 seconds. If his stats had not improved recently, that first strike would have knocked him out cold. Nobody had seen anything. Drunk Jack. It did not take much thinking to figure out who hired him. Rain slapped Jack awake. The thing had not been washed in at least a month. He nodded frantically, probably more to get the sock out than anything. The sock went back in. We're in the forest. By the time anyone notices you are gone, it will be weeks. A kid threatening murder. But Rain laid out exactly how Rain do it, step by step, calmly, logically. So tell him. He paid him to break his hand just as Rain suspected. Thick brows. Rain studied him closely, which made him panic even more. Rain cracked him on the head with the stick. One it is one. He squinted desperately at his hand. The answer was still one finger, but Jack no longer trusted his own eyes. Another wrong answer brought another blow. That would solve his problem. My eyes lit up just as Rain bent down to grab it. Rain spun around, gripping the stick, and saw a tall figure in the shadows of the trees. Could be someone else Jack worked with. Rain bolted into the dense forest like a monkey weaving between trees, trying to lose whoever was behind him. No footsteps. His blood froze. No, he had gotten ahead of him. If he was an enemy, Rain was dead. Basic swordsmanship jumped to level 4. Basic swordsmanship hit level 4 in an instant. A full power stepping thrust aimed straight at the stranger's face. He caught his stick with one hand. The gap between them was beyond anything Rain could overcome. Rain would take care of Drunk Jack for you. It hit him all at once. That was Hamilton, the new sheriff of Shining Gold Town. I am indeed Hamilton, the new sheriff. Then his expression shifted. My stomach dropped. I will not do anything illegal, Rain blurted out. He was the sheriff. But you should know about the recent child disappearances. That was something Rain had be willing to help fight, even without being coerced. But wait, Rain was just a kid whose combat ability was barely above a regular militia. Something felt off about that request. Hamilton laughed. Do not worry, it will not exceed his abilities. Of course. Combat Militia Profession 23. The only thing Rain regretted was not grabbing Jack's coin pouch before Hamilton showed up. When Rain got home, Mint threw her arms around him the instant he walked through the door. All his frustration melted away. My family safe and together and getting strong enough to keep it that way. The next morning, Rain turned down George's invitation to pick nuts and headed straight to the blacksmith shop. Boris was forging a hand-and-a-half sword, which made his eyes light up, but he put him on bellows duty again. If Rain had money, he could probably convince stingy Boris to teach him forging techniques today. Hamilton laughed, seeing exactly how tempted Rain was. Boris was famous in Shining Gold Town for guarding his craft secrets. Rain pulled the bellows all day, only breaking for a quick lunch at home with his family. At that rate, Rain had hit level 4 by next Sunday. Rain paused near a narrow alley. Rain listened for a moment, heard nothing more, shook his head, and kept walking. In that alley, 2 men were stuffing a small boy into a black sack. They tied him up, gagged him, and disappeared into the shadows. One of them was the man from the wanted poster, Scarface. His partner, a bearded man he called Boss, was running the operation. They have been kidnapping kids across multiple towns. Scarface pushed a snack cart through the streets to scout targets. He warned Scarface not to ask questions about what they needed kids for. Their plan was to finish scouting the south side of town, soon collect their payment, then flee to the county capital to lie low for a while. The evil had passed right by him, close enough to touch. An old man with a goat beard showed up with a greyhound-type hunting dog, long-limbed, bow-shaped body built for speed. He told them each to pick a 3-month-old greyhound puppy from the kennel. After that, he basically left them to figure things out on their own. Worst number. Dog trainer profession panel triggered. That confirmed it. That evening, a maid came for him again. The trainees went wild with speculation. The moment Rain walked in, an incredible smell hit him. Without looking up, she said, "Rain, there is a piece of rage bear meat on the table." Rain did not bother with the knife. Then warmth exploded from his stomach and spread through his entire body. "That is rage bear meat," Creo explained. So that is why she only gave him a palm-sized portion. A breathing technique. And she was just handing it to him. The written instructions described breathing rhythms to match each position. So that was how you can swing that massive great sword like it is nothing. This one primarily develops constitution and strength. Current situation was a polite way of saying you are a scrawny stick. She explained that the parchment contained the giant bear breathing technique, plus instructions for a special medicine. As for the advanced potions needed to become a full knight, she paused and gave him a look. She told him she would be leaving Habsburg Manor before long, but she had leave a supply of black tongue oil with Shadia for him. Rain could not bring himself to lie. She laughed a bright ringing sound. If you reach the rank of full knight before you turn 18, he would take you as one of his followers. Even within the manor, if others find out, it will not end well for you. Was that about noble family politics? Whatever her reasons, that was an opportunity. Rain would be insane to refuse. She nodded with satisfaction and told him to study the technique. The giant bear breathing technique had 7 poses arranged from easy to hard. 5 minutes in. Rain was drenched in sweat and shaking. Any tips? Breathing is everything, Rhea said. It smelled like Tiger Balm from his old world. The muscle fatigue was replaced by a warm, tingling current. You practiced the giant bear breathing technique. And then something completely new. Checking requirements for Night Squire promotion. 2 Strength 8, Agility 8, Constitution 8. Current conditions not met. His swordsmanship already met part of Condition 3, but horsemanship, shield, defense, archery, Rain had not even started those. No more guessing. The system showed the giant bear breathing technique under his militia panel, probably because there was no better fit, and it certainly did not belong under Blacksmith Apprentice. A huge jump from 5 minutes without it. It must have been building up from days of sword training, and the breathing technique pushed it over the edge. Shadia stared at him in disbelief. They grasped the essentials, then held it for over 30 minutes straight. Good to know? Kreia told him to go rest. Today made one thing crystal clear. Rain identified 4 barriers. Second, the food required was special. Without it, his breathing technique experience barely moved. Kreia had mentioned advanced potions needed for knight promotion, something so rare that even she, Account's daughter, looked troubled discussing it. To walk the path of power, Rain needed money backing and someone who believed in his value. George immediately asked what the headmaid wanted. Oh, get lost. Others could not reconcile that with him being a farmer's son. The old instructor said it was about building trust between dog and owner. All Rain could think about was sword practice and the breathing technique. Another piece of rage bear meat on the silver platter. Rain gave everything he had against Kreia and still lasted only about 30 seconds. Kreia watched him pick himself up without a trace of frustration and seemed to appreciate that. Do you know why you did not? Every time you strike his eyes, focus on exactly where you are aiming. Keep his gaze level. On his next attempt, Rain kept his eyes neutral, letting his gaze rest on Kreia without fixating on any specific target. Rain collapsed on the ground, drenched in sweat but feeling incredible. You're very passionate about swordsmanship. The breathing technique is his foundation. She was right. Still, Rain nodded obediently. Account's daughter personally training him for free. The giant bear breathing technique reached level 2. I could only manage 5 minutes so far, versus the required 30, but the results spoke for themselves. 4 days of breathing practice added a point of strength, naturally bringing him to 7. Militia profession experience poured in faster than it ever had before. Rain had grown far beyond the boy who woke up in the courtyard, and Kreia taught him not just how to swing a sword, but how to truly fight. I plan to save the skill point until the breathing technique hit level 3, then use it to jump straight to level 4. On Saturday evening, after finishing training with Kreia, a maid was escorting him out of the castle when they ran into a tall noble boy. The maid flinched visibly. "Young Master Dennis," she said, bowing quickly. I could feel his gaze on his back. Night watchmen were already making their rounds. They were official imperial forces under the sheriff's command, a completely different class from civilian militia. Becoming a night watchman would not be bad either. Near his front door, Rain saw Anna standing in the chilly autumn wind clutching a small basket. Rain looked at the 5 neatly arranged pies in the basket, and something soft inside him ached. She smiled, turned, and walked back to her house with a little bounce in her step. Anna had spent days working for Mrs. That night, Rain could not sleep. Anna's house. Rain grabbed a carpenter's hammer from the storage room, one pointed end, one round, and crept outside like a cat. Boss, she is feisty. Then Anna's muffled sobbing. If Rain rushed in and failed, both Anna and Rain would die. Rain looked at the hammer pointed end up. Rain slid it into his oversized sleeve. The one called Scarface said. The door cracked open. "No Scar. What do you want, kid?" Rain was looking for Anna. "Do not come back. Could you give her a small gift for him?" The hammer slid silently into his palm. I prepared for Anna. The hammer hit Scarface right between the eyes. Then his body started falling backward. Rain took his short sword and a compact crossbow from his belt, then peered through the window. He was too focused on what he was doing. Rain raised the crossbow and fired. He was already lunging forward. His eyes went wide. His body twitched a few times, then went still. Rain just killed 2 people. No, Rain protected someone. In that world, Rain needed to be able to protect himself, his family, and anyone else he cared about. Anna was trembling behind the wreckage of her torn clothes, staring at him like a frightened deer. Rain patted her back gently. "Let him check outside," Rain asked meekly, making himself look harmless. Rain yanked the sword from the dead man's throat, pushed Anna behind him, and pointed the blade at the doorway. Then a familiar, infuriating silhouette appeared in the doorframe. "Hamilton, the sheriff?" Hamilton stared at the scene. "Yes, sir. Under Imperial law, that should be legal self-defense, correct?" "You're good." When they saw the corpses, they froze momentarily, then looked at him with something between shock and unease. One suspect was wearing a face mask, confirmed identity Scarface from the wanted posters. The last time they met, he had seen potential, and it was already starting to shine. Want the reward? After the watchman cleaned up the bodies and the worst of the blood, the room still wryer of death. She finally fell asleep in the second half of the night, tear tracks still glistening on her lashes. The faces of the 2 men Rain had killed kept replaying in his mind. Combat Militia Profession 121. My militia was now at level 3. The next morning, his parents found Anna at the breakfast table and jumped to conclusions. "We're not." She was frightened. A man takes responsibility. The misunderstanding was complete. A clean, spacious room with deerskin chairs, bookshelves, and a mahogany desk, buried under a mountain of parchment case files. Interested in joining his night watchman to help him out. 3 miners disappeared inside the Elm Gold Mine on Shining Gold Town's southwest side. Those creatures would contaminate the water supply, but he did not have enough people to drive them off. Rain thought it over and decided to turn down Hamilton's offer to join the Night Watch. Hamilton seemed to read his mind. 15 Imperial gold coins total. But his joy lasted about 5 seconds. Scarface was a nobody, but Blackbeard has an older brother, the leader of the Hyena Gang here in Meister County. They dealt in theft, extortion, kidnapping of women and children. If Dog King found out Rain killed his brother, he had come for him. You clearly have a solution in mind, sir. Hamilton's eyes showed a flash of approval. He noticed just from his eyes and breathing pattern. Instead, he started thinking out loud. Father declared Anna was a good girl and Rain should not let her down. The old count adores her. Krea's insistence on secrecy, the warning that exposure could be dangerous for him. Hamilton added another piece. Rain, you are talented. That was a strong argument. When he saw him still hesitating, he sweetened the deal further. Bounty hunter license. Rain needed his own income stream, and bounty hunting could be exactly that. Hamilton explained that nobles could hunt bounties freely, but commoners needed an official Imperial bounty hunter permit. It allowed him to carry weapons in public at any hour. In that world, martial strength was the fastest ladder for climbing social classes. Rain was very tempted, but hesitated. Sir Rain was grateful, but Rain already promised someone Rain might become their follower. Whatever noble you follow, they serve the Dragoon Empire too. That stunned him. Hamilton added an important distinction. The difference is about who holds the initiative. Rain accepted his offer to join the Night Watch, Rain said. Of course. But if Rain needs you before then, you respond immediately. Tell his family Rain had earned 2 gold coins as a reward for providing tips on the kidnapping case, and that Hamilton had offered him a Night Watch position after training. As for the remaining 13 coins, those would fund his training, which reminded him Rain had money now. Before, Rain had been too poor. Rain practically ran to the blacksmith shop. Horseshoe forging? When Druce offered him the bellows seat, Rain shook his head. How much? They figured Rain would slink away embarrassed. Boris seemed touched. Then he handed him a heavy blacksmith's hammer. Prerequisites for blacksmith promotion. Condition 3, forge 10 qualifying items. Despite his stingy prices, his teaching was excellent. Blacksmith apprentice profession experience 5. Boris did most of the work. I needed something simpler that Rain could make entirely on his own. Horseshoe nails? My first attempts were crooked and useless, but gradually acceptable nails started appearing. Sweat pouring down his face, churning out nail after nail. By lunchtime, Rain had hit both targets simultaneously. The system asked if Rain wanted to promote to blacksmith. Acquired blacksmith core skills. Something completely new. Hammer mastery was passive. The promotion alone gave him 2 points of strength, pushing him to 9 higher than even his spirit stat now and well beyond an ordinary adult man. That was double that plus 2 powerful skills on top. Along the road, Rain found a boulder about half his height, 200 or 300 pounds. Then Rain activated Blacksmith's Might. The rush of raw powers was intoxicating, short but devastating as a trump card in combat. Before Rain could bring up the Night Watch news, Father pulled him aside. Rain? You keep running to that miser Boris's shop. But he would not teach you anything without tuition money. It might give you an edge in the exam. Rain looked at his son's darkened face and the calluses on his hands. Father, you and Mother do not need to worry about his future anymore. In return, Hamilton promised him a position in the night watch. Mother had been listening at the door. About you and Anna. His drunken father declared he supported whatever Rain decided about Anna. The man Rain killed Blackbeard, his brother, runs the hyena gang. She agreed to stay and offered to help around the house and keep him company. That afternoon, Rain checked his other core skill on the way to the blacksmith shop. Not immediately useful since Rain trained with swords. His stats now read: Name, Rain Kalin, Professions, Blacksmith, Level 1, 1, out of 100th, out of M, IL, Level 328 500. Rain noticed the core skills had level indicators but no experience bars. At Boris's shop, Rain continued learning horseshoe forging all afternoon. The next morning brought something Rain had been waiting for. Under a rain shelter sat bows of various sizes. Rain chose a war bow too, but deliberately picked a medium draw weight instead of what he could actually handle. Apparently the memory of his knee and his stomach still bothered him. Archery was hard. Rain was not about to waste a skill point on it when Rain had bigger priorities. He was thrilled. With his strength now at 9 after the blacksmith promotion, the difference was impossible to hide. Maybe the giant bear breathing technique just suits him really well. It is extremely rare across the entire empire. You might be the first case in Meister County. Then she surprised him, obviously far superior to basic swordsmanship. It requires heavy two-handed greatswords, which means the user needs serious strength. Kreia had originally planned to leave the scroll for him to study later, probably expecting Rain would need months more of breathing practice before his body was ready. She pointed to a rack. With his stats, Rain could swing it but not smoothly. First form Fury, slash. Rain lunged, mimicked her motion, and brought his sword down hard on another dummy. Kreia burst out laughing. She failed. The icon on his militia panel was a bear holding a great sword. It was honestly kind of adorable. Someone was watching. Young Master the commoner Kreia has taken interest in his named Rain. Rather than dealing with him directly and risking Kreia's anger, he devised something more elegant. Dennis had his own reasons to resent Kreia. He had lasted 3 seconds, but she would not even hold his hand. So he vented his frustrations on his seamstress's daughter named Tina, a girl his retainer had found because she vaguely resembled Kreia. Over 3 days, Rain continued archery training during the day and learned giant bear swordsmanship from Kreia each evening. Rain had only truly mastered the first form. Kreia was clearly rushing. Attack him! Giant bear swordsmanship is not defensive. 4 of the 5 forms had slash in their names that was pure aggression. Militia level 4, 18 out of 1,000, remaining 1 attribute point, 2 skill points. Today's final lesson, the secret technique of giant bear swordsmanship. The Habsburg families was called Roaring Strike, a sonic shockwave mimicking a bear's roar, combined with the 5th form Whirlwind slash sound attack plus physical attack at the same time. Ha! It lasted less than half a second, but when Rain could think again, her blade was already resting against his neck. A real master would rupture his eardrums and leave you unconscious. That was the first time Rain truly understood how important Constitution was. Then Kreia placed her great sword back on the rack and turned to face him. Even though Rain had known that was coming, hearing the words hit harder than he expected. She had given him everything. Kreia had originally planned to leave the scroll for him to study, later probably expecting Rain would need months more of breathing practice before his body was ready. Kreia said. She laughed. She explained that night breathing techniques originated from studying ferocious mutated beasts, animals transformed by mysterious forces into creatures far beyond their normal kind. Her slender arms suddenly swelled, muscles bulging against her hunting sleeve, then instantly shrank back to normal. She looked at the darkening sky. She smiled, her chestnut ponytail swinging as she turned and disappeared into the darkness outside the castle. Kreia's eldest brother Alonso was sitting in his dining room carving through a massive beef rib with silver utensils. Alonso sipped his wine. Then we'll give his dear sister the courtesy of waiting until she is gone. When will it be ready? Your will is his command, his lord. If the sibling strength were roughly equal, inheritance would follow birth order. I hope the Black Flame prayer ceremony lives up to its legend. Rain was not there when it happened. Savage Claw was no ordinary null. It remembered the taste of human flesh, especially females, soft and tender. It found Habsburg manner, the scent of cubs as it thought of them. The old one, the room Rain used to sleep in before he was moved to George's building. He grumbled about the noise, then heard something else. He slowly raised his head and saw a massive shadow crouching by the door. He counted the beds between himself and the creature. Then he heard the patrol boots on stone rhythmic and heavy. Every trainee woke up. It grabbed the nearest still-living trainee, one of the boys by the door, who had frozen in terror and charged straight through the wooden door. Savage Claw vanished into the night carrying a screaming boy under its arm. I was in the other dormitory when Rain heard Thickbrow scream. Rain shook George awake and told him to rouse everyone, then rushed to the door and looked out. What Rain saw made his blood freeze. The creature was carrying a boy, one of the trainees, shirtless and limp under one arm. A powerful body, a hideous hyena-shaped head, thick fur-covered arms. If it had chosen their dormitory instead, Rain would have been lying there helpless, just hoping it picked someone else's bed first. No, Rain refused to accept that. The manor erupted into chaos. They found the creature's trail quickly, but did not pursue into the dark forest. Sir Royd, that was the manor steward. Then Instructor Perez arrived, the noble squire's combat teacher. Knight Royd agreed. Hbert gathered all of them trainees. Better to send them home while the knights dealt with the danger. 2 boys were dead. I warned him not to go to the fields tomorrow and told Mother to stay away from the forest. They listened since Rain told them about the night watch offer. 3 night watchmen stood at the door in black leather armor carrying torches. That was his own neighborhood. When Rain put it all on, he looked like one of them, just shorter and younger. We set out into the dark streets. Rain described the knoll honestly. The 3 watchmen exchanged serious looks. No solo engagements. Let's light all the lamps first, the squad leader said. Making a good impression on his future colleagues could not hurt. Detected. Prerequisites for night watchman promotion. A new combat profession. Rain thought for exactly 1 second, then spent his last skill point on basic archery, jumping it from level 1 to level 2. When Rain promoted from blacksmith apprentice to blacksmith, Rain gained 2 strength points and 2 core skills. All conditions met. Strength 1, agility 1, spirit 1. That was even better than the blacksmith promotion. I could see a mouse poking out of its hole in a shadowed corner. Dark vision was like wearing permanent night vision goggles. Then Rain checked danger sense. My spirit was already 9, his highest stat after the promotion bonus. Rain. Rain had been staring into space while reviewing his panel. No signal flares went up either. All available watchmen were to assemble at the administrative hall. And after his promotion, Rain wanted to see what a real battle between extraordinary beings looked like. If the situation allowed it, Rain intended to make that null pay. At the administrative hall, Hamilton stood in full knight's plate armor with sword and shield. Hamilton plus about 20 watchmen, including him, took the north exit, the farthest from town. Hawks circled overhead, and when a greyhound burst from the western tree line barking wildly, the null knew it had been found. It charged at the dog, but the greyhound was fast enough to stay ahead in the dense trees. Silence from the north. Stupid humans. A dense volley tore through the forest air. Thanks to his dark vision, Rain could see it clearly even in the dim, foggy forest. The kidnapped trainee was gone. 1 Iron Man, its name for armored knights plus a line of archers. Iron Man with a great sword, probably Perez, plus dozens of soldiers in chainmail. All 3 exits sealed. North was its only chance. It had chosen them as its breakout point. Strength 10, agility 9, spirit 9, 1, attribute point and 1 skill point saved. Fire, Hamilton roared, swinging his long sword forward. 2 arrows found their mark but barely penetrated its stolen armor and steel wire muscles. Hamilton did not flinch. But at the last possible second, the null pulled a feint. It had specifically avoided the Iron Man to attack the softer targets. Several hemp nets soaked in linseed oil for extra toughness sailed toward the creature. It had a supernatural ability, wind shear, enhanced speed, and cutting power. The null was already sprinting for the valley's north exit when Hamilton hurled his shield like a spinning disc at its back. The watchman fired another volley blocking the exit. Without shield or helmet, now just as long sword, he thrust straight at the creature. It unleashed its killing move, silver lightning from below. Without armor, he had been disemboweled. The null knew it was dying. Then there was just 1 person left in its path. Its bloodied mouth curled into something like a smile. The null was charging straight at him, the smallest, thinnest person on the field. But Rain thought about last night. Maybe for Anna. Blacksmith's might. Rain had never felt that powerful in his life. Normally, Rain trained with a heavy great sword. That tiny human was actually attacking. The impact sent shockwaves through his arms, but Rain felt it. Rain was knocked back even farther, skidding over 10 steps. The watchman behind him stared in disbelief. Hamilton seized the opening. He crashed to the ground, his earlier wounds tearing open, blood spraying from multiple gashes. Me again. Rain had remembered Krea's lesson, never telegraph his attack. The skull was the hardest bone in the body. The null turned, but its battered body could not keep up with its brain anymore. Then it felt an itch on its neck. The ferocity drained from its green eyes. Both carotid arteries severed. The entire exchange from his first jump slash to the killing blow had lasted maybe 5 seconds. A scrawny 14-year-old had just delivered the finishing blow to a ferocious mutant null that had fought a knight to a standstill. Ha ha! Hamilton recognized his technique immediately. That was fine. The Manor's 2 search teams were converging on their position. He stepped close to Hamilton, who was getting his wounds bandaged. Rain did it. The watchman glanced between them since the arrangement and saluted. On the walk back, Rain finally checked his notifications. Giant Bear's swordsmanship jumped straight to level 254 out of 300, and his night watchman profession was already at 87 out of 100. Dangerous, yes, but incredibly effective. Hamilton's full power burst was roughly equal to the null at full strength, around 20 points of strength. Knights shattered that limit entirely through breathing techniques. At home, his family panicked when they saw him covered in blood. It's dangerous, but it beats being a dirt farmer for life. Rain had been going since the previous evening without sleep. Every muscle in his body screamed. Pushing his strength to 14 had overloaded his muscles, and the price came due hours later. The power surge was not free. I made a mental note. He barely recognized himself. My old shirt was too tight, so Rain pulled on one of Father's larger tunics to hide his build. Mint, in her cute apron dress, was asking when they had harvest, counting months on her fingers. Rain thought about yesterday, facing that null, its crushing presence, its terrifying strength. It was having something to protect. A fighter with a strong body but a weak spirit would never use their full strength in a real crisis. Spirit attributes significantly improved. Not vision, something deeper. Not just experience points and skill levels, but growth as a person. Mother had upgraded their meals significantly since Rain had given the family those 2 gold coins. My growing body and skyrocketing stats demanded fuel constantly. Anna Peak ticked around the doorframe, gave him a shy nod, and followed Mint back outside. No word came from the Manor about resuming training, and Hamilton had not sent for him either. But first, Rain stopped at the pie shop and devoured 3 meat pies the size of 12-inch pizzas. If Rain could afford that kind of food daily, his breathing technique progress would skyrocket. Word had already spread through town. The hammer felt different now with the Hammer Mastery core skill, but experience gain had slowed dramatically after promoting to full blacksmith. Rain wanted to work here as a paid assistant. The other apprentices shot him nervous glances, worried Rain had taken the spot they had been hoping for. Maybe that was his chance to ask Boris about expanding his training options. 5 gold coins for all 3, he said. Boris, the stingiest man in town, was practically begging him to stay, but his ambition stretched far beyond a small-town smithy. I would start with material selection. It was stacked with raw ore plus neatly arranged ingots of iron, copper, and tin. This is hematite. My spirit of 9 gave him sharp observation and excellent memory. Then Boris reached into a drawer and pulled out something special. This is star iron, also called meteorite ore. The density was extraordinary. Star iron. Special ore identified meteorite iron. Blacksmith profession 5. 5 points from a single identification compared to 1 point per half hour of horseshoe forging. Any other special ores? If you want to learn more rare ores, try the county capital's large smithies or the Manor's own forge. The county capital was a full day's round trip without a horse. By evening, his blacksmith level sat at level 123 out of 100. At dinner, Mother scolded him for buying expensive meat pies instead of bringing raw ingredients to bake themselves. That night, his muscle soreness had faded enough to attempt some breathing practice. The difference between training with and without the oil was enormous. Security had clearly been tightened since the null attack. Shadia greeted him with a rare half-smile. She led him through the castle's stone corridors to her quarters. The rhythmic clang of hammer on metal, the castle forge right there just down the corridor. She nodded, and when Rain pressed for details, gave him a useful rundown. My eyes lit up. Rain. His energy should be focused on the breathing technique and swordsmanship. Breathing practice and sword training consumed nearly all of an aspiring knight's time. Every blacksmith level was essentially a combat upgrade, but Rain could not explain any of that. With his muscle soreness finally gone, Rain threw himself into breathing practice using the oil. Constitution went from 6 to 7, so the breathing technique focused its benefits where Rain was weakest. 3 days passed with no word about resuming training. At his office, Hamilton looked pale, and Rain could smell medicinal ointment. Remember the fisherman Rain mentioned? We need to push them back now before it is too late. Glimmer Lake supplied all of Shining Gold Town's water. Rain thought it through quickly. I would go, but Rain need a proper weapon. He handed it to him. This was not some cheap militia blade. The weight was perfect for his current strength. Thank you, sir. It would be submitted for merit point evaluation and serve as his service record for future promotions. Can merit points be exchanged for training supplies like ferocious beast meat? Hamilton's advice about merit points was invaluable. The advancement potion needed to become a full knight was not only extremely expensive if bought privately, but nearly impossible to find. Kreia had never explained any of that, probably because she assumed Rain would not face the advancement threshold for years. Rain signed up, took his new great sword, and headed out. The embarrassing part, Rain had never ridden a horse before. Knight Squire advancement required horsemanship. 2 hours later, they stood on a hillside overlooking Glimmer Lake. Beautiful, Rain murmured. Then his enhanced vision caught movement at the far end of the lake. They had already reached the lake itself faster than intelligence had predicted. I preferred to eliminate them completely rather than just driving them upstream. First, they dealt with 4 fishermen scouts wandering the lake shore. The 10 watchmen fanned out in a half circle and dropped all 4 with a single volley. Fish heads with bulging eyes and mouths full of sharp teeth reeking of rot-webbed hands and feet. Willen showed him the dark gray dorsal fin running down one's back, the identifying mark of evil-finned fishmen. The tracks grew denser until they spotted the camp. This is at least 100. My night watchman, 87 out of 100. Walking away now felt like leaving money on the table. So his concern was whether Rain could hold the line by himself. My giant bear swordsmanship was designed for exactly that. I'm confident, Captain. Spike traps, trip ropes, all clearly marked so they would not trigger them themselves. Now they just needed Mateo to do his part. The camp exploded like a kicked anthill. They funneled through a narrow valley passage straight into their kill zone. They scrambled in every direction but found no escape. The system notifications were rich. Giant Bear swordsmanship reached level 3, 101 out of 500. That would push his strength from 10 to 16 during activation? Maybe. The stamina recovery from adding the point hit instantly. The fishermen across the river had noticed their warriors were not coming back. The whole swarm charged straight at them. But that time, a tall fisherman with a gleaming trident stopped the charge right at the valley entrance. The plan was falling apart. That is when Rain made his move. Blacksmith's might strength surged to 16. The trident leader spun around roaring and charged him with its weapon raised. At the peak of his arc, Rain brought the great sword down with every ounce of those 16 points of strength. It felt like his body and the sword were a single thing. The blade continued straight through the fisherman's skull, down through its chest, all the way to its waist. Then blue blood erupted from the line like a fountain, and it split apart. The watchmen stood up from their hiding spots, grinning, barely needing to do anything. Rain was still savoring that jump slash. Night Watchman climbed to level 2, 137 out of 300. In real combat against real enemies with real stakes, that is where true growth happened. The final cleanup was almost too easy. The few that tried to loop back to the river met a wall of arrows. Maybe a handful escaped into the water, but without their settlement and numbers, they were finished. Low-intensity fighting meant lower rewards. The watchmen immediately spread out through the camp, searching every hut and corpse. Rain had been holding back, thinking it would look greedy on his first mission. 3/10 went to the Empire. 7/10 split among the team based on contribution combat role and even injury compensation. Half of everything. Most huts held nothing but clay pots, dried fish, and overwhelming stench. Inside a handful of gold and silver coins, a green agate stone, several chunks of magnetite ore, and what looked like a gold nugget. Too light, just a high-quality piece of yellow copper ore, worthless compared to what he had hoped. Rain picked it up carefully. It was extraordinarily heavy, denser than even star iron. Rain brought everything to Willen in a big cloth sack. "Take it now," he said with a grin. "Keep it quiet, and if it turns out to be valuable, buy them each a glass of tequila." Then one of the watchmen called Willen over urgently. For toes, Willen's face went white. He ordered immediate retreat. As they rode hard back toward town, Rain asked why he was so alarmed. Of course, an adult ogre would make that null, either submit and serve or flee on sight. He told him about Alboro Town, the settlement Rain had heard the fake rich kids mention on his very first day. If a knight as strong as Hamilton could not handle one, then even with Blacksmith's might at full power, Rain would be crushed. Will suspected the fishmen had not migrated to Glimmer Lake voluntarily. The ogre had herded them there, keeping them as livestock. Too many incidents, too many monsters moving into areas they should not be. An ogre could be lurking in those same woods, and Rain was nowhere near strong enough to face one. While Rain was reporting to Hamilton about the fisherman mission, he had no idea that someone was already hunting him. In the noisy Oak Tavern, Thickbrow's family business, a plain looking man in a black-belted coat sat sipping dark ale. He had received orders from someone high up: eliminate a teenage boy named Rain Farmer's son, currently in servant training at Hapsburg Manor. Poisonblade had done worse jobs. From the tavern chatter, he quickly learned that training had been suspended after the Null attack. Now he just needed to ambush him on his way home. But when Willen mentioned the ogre tracks, Hamilton shot to his feet. Hamilton sat back down slowly, thinking hard. After Willen left, Rain asked Hamilton directly, "Sir, are ogres that dangerous even for someone at his level?" His face was grim. Even a full knight can barely withstand their attacks head-on. Numbers that made the ferocious Null, which had nearly killed Hamilton, seem small by comparison. For Rain, surviving this world now meant growing faster than every monster and every assassin that came for him.